wanted to do a quick video on tithing. So I saw a video by Dr. Michael Brown. He has a daily show Monday through Friday on YouTube. It's called Line of Fire. His YouTube channel is called Ask Dr. Brown. And I saw just this morning, a show that had streamed 6 days ago, and the entire topic for the entire hour was, should Christians tithe? And in this stream, he goes over the scriptures, but basically, to summarize it, he says that Christians are not required to tithe in the New Testament, and he gives the scriptures that why, but then he said that it's basically a principle, and he goes into the principle of charity and generosity, and he gives a lot of instances within the Bible, and then he also gives instances that happened to him personally in his life, which was I really enjoyed it. So as he was giving his experiences, really quickly to go over it, I would encourage you to go and watch the entire hour. The name of that one show for that day is Should Christians Tithe? But he basically said he was married with 2 children. He was actually working as a salesman while he was still working on his PhD. And he was working as a salesman, and he was selling pictures. And his landlord was a very miserable, grouchy person, and he was not very reasonable or sympathetic that he wanted his rent on the month, and Dr. Brown had on the first of each month, and Dr. Brown did not have enough money to tithe and still make his rent. So he decided to tithe anyway, because he said when he was thinking about not tithing, Malachi 3 came to his mind, which God says, test me on this. And so he decided to do that. And he said his sales just quadrupled. And it really shocked him how immediately faithful God was to his word and his promise. And so when he gave that example in that teaching, it brought to mind the one and only time that ever happened to me in that strong of a capacity. And in Malachi 3 was specifically quoted to me. So my half sister and I we heard that a very famous pastor had come to a city that wasn't too far away from us, and so we wanted to go see him in person because we've seen him on TV a million times. And so we decided to go, and in the discussion, I had an ache in my left collarbone for weeks. I would say at the minimum 2 months, for several weeks, in this collarbone from here, the entire collarbone to my shoulder. And unknown to me, my sister didn't know about this. I didn't discuss it with anybody. If it persisted, I would have gone to see a doctor. But my sister had a persistent pain in her jaw. And I would come to find out later, when we were discussed after we had seen the sermon, days later, we were discussing it, and we found out about each other's aches and pains and what had happened. But on the way there, while we were there, we did not discuss it. So she had a continuous pain in her jawbone, and it was for months. And so we went to the sermon. There was only between 100 or 200 people in this room, and it was a magnificent, really, really great sermon on Jesus's perspective, and how we, even as Christians, our perspective on Jesus changes as a young person, as a young adult, and as we get older. And so anyway, after that, he asked if anybody wanted to come up for prayer, for anything, for healing, any kind of healing, physical healing, financial healing, or whatever. So I definitely went up. And when he came to me, he rested his hand on my shoulder, on this clavicle, on this collarbone. And so he rested it and he prayed for me. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. So then my sister also went up. And I would remember I didn't know where she was standing in the line. I wasn't watching her. I was praying. And I would come to find out after that when he came to pray for her, he held her jawbone like this and prayed for her. So that is during the sermon. So it came time to, and the reason I tell you that is because it's the same sermon and the same pastor where this tithing event or situation happened to me. So I am sitting and it comes time for the donations, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm a single mom. I'm outside in public, so I don't want to. I want to lower my voice. So at the time, I'm a single mom of a teenager, and I'm going through a lot of financial, struggles and trauma in my life. Still like dealing with this tragedy that had happened to me, and $20 would have been a sacrificial tithing for me at the time. So I am getting ready and feeling good about, maybe $20 that I would give as a donation. And so I hear the still small voice, and some of you may know what this is. I know Dr. Micah Brown would definitely know what this is. Even some Christians may say they don't experience this, but a still small voice says, write a check. So I dismiss it right away. I'm going to give my $20, and, that's a good amount for me. So I hear write a check, and I automatically dismiss it, but it persists. Write a check. So I realize, okay, this thing is not going away. This could very likely be Holy Spirit talking to me for a reason. So, pardon me. So I start talking to Holy Spirit in my head, and I say, okay, write a check for what, $50? Or you need me to write a check for $50? That would be a good donation. So then I hear an amount, $200. $200. It's $200. And I immediately dismiss it, And so I said, there's no way. And it would not stop. Write a check for $200. So I start saying, I realize this, it's so persistent. I start to talk to the Holy Spirit. And I said, Holy Spirit, I cannot afford to write a check for $200. I said, $100 would be 1/4 of my car payment. At the time, I had a car that was only a few years old, and my car payment was $400 a month. And so I said, $200 would be half of my car payment. I wouldn't be able to make my car payment. I said, even if I make a donation of $100, it's still 1/4 of my car payment. I can't do that. And I said, I'm giving this $20. So, and then I'd resign. I'm writing a check, but I'm writing a check for $50 and $50 alone. And it would not stop. Write a check for $200. And I said, I cannot. Right, that is crazy. And then I heard Malachi 3. Test me in this. Test me in this. And when I heard that, I was like, oh. So I was, to tell you the truth, I was very afraid and concerned. So I wrote the check for $200. And before I put it in the offering tray, I said, Lord, you are a faithful God, and you are faithful to your promises. And as your word says, I am putting you through the test. This is half of my car payment. I can't afford this. And I gave it. And so, of course, the next month, that very coming month, I did not have my car payment in full. So I had to call them, and I didn't know how the Lord would show up. But I had to call them, and I asked for an extension to pay my car payment, and they do that sometimes. And so I asked. I didn't tell her why. I did not tell her why. I did not tell her about the pastor I went to see and about my donation. I did not go into that. I just said I needed time to make that payment. And so she said, would you like me to lower your car payment for you per month? And I said, yes, please. How do we do that? And so she lowered my car payment from $400 a month to $270 a month. And then that's not all that happened. After she lowered the car payment, I was able to pay off the car over a year early. By the grace of God, I was able to pay it off in full and then turn the car over to my son. And it is impeccable. It is in impeccable condition. It's 10 years old, but you would never know that to look at it. This vehicle looks like maybe 4 or 5 years old. The paint job, everything about the car, the interior is just impeccable condition. And my son has been driving it now for over 2 years. And God has really had his hand of protection over my son and this vehicle as in regards to maintenance and repairs and things like that have, by the grace of God, been very minimal. So that he really, really did come through on his promise as far as being generous and charitable and tithing. And then afterwards, after it was a couple of days after my half-sister and I were talking about the sermon and about this pastor, and I said, you know, Nance, that's her nickname. I said, funny thing, when I went up for healing, I told her about the pain I had in my collarbone for several weeks. And I said, he put his hand, I saw as he was praying for some people, he was putting his hand on their heads, putting his hand on their chest. I said, when he came to pray for me, he put his hand on my shoulder and on my collarbone. And I said, I realized the next day that my bone, the collarbone that I had the pain in for several weeks had gone away. And, I didn't know at the time if it was coincidental or not. But then my half-sister said to me, she said, when he came to pray for me, I had a pain in my jawbone for months. And she didn't want to go to the dentist. She was afraid that she would get some kind of bad news or something. So she had a pain in her jaw for months. And she said, when he came up and prayed for me, he grabbed me by my jawbone. And she said, I haven't had the pain in my jaw since then. So two pretty miraculous things happened that day when we went to that sermon for healing, and that amazing lesson that God taught me about charity and generosity and tithing, and that how he is faithful to his word. So, we really should, as Christians, invest in those who feed us and shepherd us and grow, and that we are being fed by their teaching and their ministries, and we are growing spiritually. We really should ungrudgingly be charitable and generous, because the Lord is faithful in so many wonderful ways. And it is true, whatever we give will be given back to us, pressed down, shaken, overly abundantly in one way or another. So that the reason I made the video is because I really don't go over doctrine with you, or as far as is tithing required, or it's as Dr. Michael Brown says, I would encourage you to go watch his hour teaching on it. He goes over all the scriptures. It is really not commanded of Christians in the New Testament. It's not a requirement, but it is definitely a principle that is just another example of God's charity, generosity, and love towards us, his kids. So I encourage you to go look at his YouTube channel and listen to this teaching. And that was my personal experience. I have a habit of not finishing my sentences. That was my example of the only time that Malachi 3 ever was spoken to me by Holy Spirit. And the only time that ever happened was God wanted to demonstrate and display his not only his faithfulness to his promises, but that emphasize the fact that we should be charitable and generous as the children of God, and that God will always provide for us and take care of us. He really has provided and protected as far as this vehicle, because this vehicle was so essential, so very essential to my life, and is essential to my son's life even now. So anyway, have a great rest of the week, and God bless you. Bye-bye.